I do have a political cartoon to analyze. Okay, so you got the WPA, the PWA, the AAA, the SEC, the TVA, all this stuff, right? It's going to cost money. You need more work relief. This is what Hopkins says. This is the dole. This is your welfare. Industry saying like, dude, Harry, Hopkins, that's, whoa. Congress says, hey, step aside, boys. We'll handle this as the national budget sails away. Okay? Which leads me to one of the questions on your homework. And there was a question on your homework about Keynesian economics. Okay? And does this ring a bell? Keynesian economics? Okay? We had varying degrees of quality answers on that. But basically, what's his name? Something Waldo Keynes, something, God, I said it a second hour. You remember the full name of the guy's name?
What?
Maynard Keynes?
John
Maynard Keynes. Okay. Says that during a time of economic slowdown, the government should do what? Pump money into the economy. And we can do that because we've gone off the gold standard, yes? And they want the government to spend money. Is the government spending money? Yes, a lot of money. Have we been using Keynesian economics for the last 90 years in this country? Yes. Does it work? Yeah, sometimes. Could it also be one of the reasons why we have $35 trillion in debt? So in the good times, like when things are going well, right? That's when you're supposed to like pay down the debt and balance the budget, right? But the government keeps spending money even when we're not in an economic slowdown. Yes? Which is a problem. Okay. So, Keynesian economics, right here. Okay. I'll talk about a couple other questions on the home. Okay. Now, there's some public works building going on here. Also talked about aircraft carriers being built by the Public Works Administration. Okay. This is USS Yorktown. Okay, which will be sunk. The Battle of Midway Island in World War II. Okay. The Lexington will also be sunk, but that's at the Battle of Coral Sea. This is the Milwaukee County Courthouse in Milwaukee, and it's still standing. Okay. Just other types of public works. Okay. Lots of building, lots of construction. Okay. All right. So let's pause for a second and think about this. Okay. Roosevelt mentioned possibly, depending on how you feel about it, maybe some fascism used, okay, with the National Recovery Administration. It's going to be declared unconstitutional. It's going to be struck down. Other things are going to be struck down. But besides fascism, what are we seeing Roosevelt employ here? What kind of ism? What is public works? What is works progress? What is this? This is socialism. Okay, so from a political mindset, guys, the right or Republicans are going to have easy stuff to criticize Roosevelt for. Yes? And that's expected. Now, as you guys know, Roosevelt's going to get elected 4 times. So these programs are helping a lot of people. And he is definitely earning their vote. Okay? Or buying it, depending on whatever view you have of it. Okay? Santa Claus is here. Okay? Vote for me. All right. But, so the criticism that Roosevelt's going to get attacked with, okay, so we're talking about here, resistance to FDR, is also going to come from the left, that he's not doing enough to help people. The New Deal is not going far enough. And that's a much more interesting argument than your typical right-left argument, okay? So the next slide, guys, what focus today is mostly going to be about is these attacks on Roosevelt. Now, the attacks are somewhat effective, but as you know, he's going to get reelected and so forth, okay? So from the right, Republicans and some Dems thought the New Deal was socialism. Well, you don't have to think too hard about that. It's pretty simple. There's a lot of socialism. But those on the right, conservatives, are going to form this thing called the American Liberty League. And they're going to try and fight Roosevelt on these programs. In their view, in their way, they said we're going to combat radicalism, the socialism, preserve property rights, and uphold the Constitution. And you guys know he's also going to get pushback from the Supreme Court. So question 1 and question 2 of your homework dealt with the Supreme Court. Yes? So let's talk about that right now, because this is something you're going to want to write about on your test, is this conflict with the Supreme Court, okay? And you guys did the homework, did a pretty darn good job of answering these questions, okay? Some people had like 6 different things that the Supreme Court struck down as unconstitutional. So you guys specifically listed the AAA, specifically listed the NRA as being struck down. Some of you talked about the minimum wage being struck down as well, which was part of the NRA. Okay, so let's talk about the court. Now, guys, when something is challenged as unconstitutional, the Supreme Court doesn't just take that case. Now, the Supreme Court has something called original jurisdiction. We'll learn about this in government class late in the semester. But the Supreme Court can take cases dealing with the Constitution as the original case. But generally, they work their way to the Supreme Court. They start with district courts, federal district courts, go to appeals courts, and then to the Supreme Court. Okay? So it takes years, generally, for cases to reach the Supreme Court. Does this make sense? Okay? So, how many justices are on the Supreme Court? None. Okay? So, guys, we're getting into 1936, 1937, when the court begins to overturn this stuff. Okay, so a lot of it will be passed and implemented, and then, sorry, you can't do that type of stuff. You guys with me on this? Okay? Now, there's 9 justices on the Supreme Court. Who gets to pick those people? The President of the United States gets to choose those people when there is a vacancy. He can't fire them and appoint new ones. Okay? How long does a federal judge or a Supreme Court judge get to serve once they go on the bench? For life. Now, guys, we do this for a reason. This stuff's going to be up here for the next 40 minutes. We give them life terms for a reason, so they don't have to get reelected. They don't have to campaign. Their job is to interpret the Constitution and the law. Does the law follow the Constitution? That could be a local law, that could be a state law, or it could be a federal law. Okay, that's their job. And because they don't have to be reelected or elected, they don't answer to the whim of politics. Or they don't answer to the people either. They answer to the Constitution. Okay? So, the president picks them when there's a vacancy. Now, Roosevelt, upset by these things being overturned, especially the NRA, he wanted to pack the court. Which means this, guys. He wanted to add 6 new justices. 9 plus 6 equals 15. Now, who would get to pick those 6 justices? Roosevelt. Now, he also, that wasn't good enough. He also wanted a retirement age of 70. Well, if we had instituted this, would we have the same thing for president? Reagan wouldn't have been president. Biden would have been president. You guys know Jimmy Carter turns 100 tomorrow. This would be the oldest living American president ever. Jimmy Carter, if he survives today. Okay. Birthday's October 1st, 1924. That man's seen a lot. Okay. So retirement, I think it's 70 and a half. Okay. So retirement. Now, how many of the 9? 2 of them were 70. Those 2 don't want to lose their jobs. Okay. So Roosevelt talks about packing the court. Now, if he got to choose 2 that retired, this would give him 8 of 15. Now, when the Supreme Court makes a decision, they set what's called a precedent. So from here on out, Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, from here on out, separate is not equal. And how many judges with a 9-judge court do you need for a majority opinion? 5. Okay? So if you packed the court and made it 15 judges, and Roosevelt got to pick 8 of them, does this not smack as one branch of government trying to take over another branch of government? Does this not smack of dictatorship? Now, guys, both Republicans and Democrats are like, hey, Roosevelt, chill out, man. You can't be doing this. Okay? This would not have likely happened, but he did push for it until these 2 old men are going to switch their vote on one of these cases. And it just so happens to be this case. The minimum wage. So when I tell you the minimum wage got struck down as unconstitutional, where in the Constitution does it give the authority of the federal government to tell a private business in Wichita, Kansas, how much they have to pay their employees? Go to question 3 of your homework. Question 3. The interstate. What? Commerce clause. Okay. Which, if you didn't answer that question very well, which some of you didn't, it really expanded government reach. Now, the Interstate Commerce Clause has always been in the Constitution. It was never used to this extent before. Okay, it's going to expand government powers incredibly. Okay, so you guys just don't really seem with it today. I'm telling you, like, I'm looking out there and I see struggle. Okay. So these 2 justices, these 2 old men, are going to switch their vote on the minimum wage. Let's just talk about the minimum wage. Okay? Anybody in here work for the minimum wage? You make $7.25? You work for $7.25?
I did over the summer.
Okay, raise your hand if you have a job. Okay, look around the room. These are all people that have jobs. Okay. If you work for minimum wage, put your hand down. Okay, keep your hand up if you make at least $8 an hour. Keep looking around the room. 9. 10. Okay, just for people at home. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of 20 that are making $10 or more. 11. Nope, one hand went down. Can't see that. 12. Okay, another hand went down. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 that make $12 an hour. 13. 3 hands went down. I got 3 up. 4 up. 14. I got 4. Listen. Listen. You should not be working for minimum wage. You're a Bishop Carroll Catholic High School student. You know how to wear a uniform. You know how to show up on time. You know how to follow instructions. You know how to read. You do all those things. You're trustworthy. To what? 7:45?
9. I'm proud.
Okay, 9. Good, good. Listen. No. If you were working for less than $9 an hour, you should go find another job. Okay? Very few people work for the minimum wage. Okay, and I don't know if you guys have noticed lately, Democrats haven't been talking about the minimum wage much. Okay, they used to talk about it all the time, like we need to increase the minimum wage. No, we don't. Okay, in fact, some people feel like we shouldn't even have one. Now, this is a tough argument to have with 17 and 18-year-olds, or 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Okay, but listen, what you guys do when you get an entry-level job is you get experience. When you put in an artificial wage, a minimum wage, you're blocking that door to allow people to get experience. High school kids. Because the next job you go for, they're going to ask you, what kind of experience do you have? If you can't get in the door because the minimum wage is too high, you're shutting people out of the system. And who is the largest group of unemployed in this country are high school African American kids. The highest unemployment in the country. So you're blocking the door for these people to get in. Now, this is also an argument about illegal immigration, is that people that are in the country illegally oftentimes will work for money under the table and will take less than minimum wage. And so what happens to wages overall, they're brought down for unskilled labor. And who's affected by that more than anybody else? Black and brown people. Okay? And so, I mean, you really have to look at the whole situation here. You know, obviously, guys, you want labor laws that protect people. We don't live in Europe. And there is no such thing as that where the government mandates a living wage. If you go to Italy, guys, and you have a waiter or a waitress, okay, they make a living wage. That is their career. Now, my sister, who's 2 years older than me, has made waiting tables a career. Okay, her husband built water towers. And they would live in one location for 6 months to a year. He would build a water tower and then move to another place in their trailer that they pulled behind the truck. And they would live there for 6 months or a year. And she would get a job at a restaurant. And she got on with Cracker Barrel. And there's a Cracker Barrel everywhere. You know, if there's not a Cracker Barrel within 5 miles, there's one within 30 miles. So she's worked at literally like 16 different Cracker Barrels. Now, she finally settled down in Tennessee, and she works at Cracker Barrel, and she works at Longhorn Steakhouse. Okay? And she's made a living out of it, but it's not a living wage. Okay? Now, if they get rid of the tax on tips, it'll get closer to that. And if you work at a good restaurant, like Success, and the average bill is, $200, what's 20%? $40. And if you have 15 tables that night, you're making some bank. Yeah. That's probably the weekend. Okay. But that's what my sister does. She works at at Longhorn Steakhouse on the weekends. And then during the week, and she gets benefits, she gets health care paid for by Cracker Barrel. So she's got health care. Okay, so listen, this is not Europe. Okay, entry-level jobs are there to help people get experience, to learn work ethic, to show up on time, to learn how to be a good employee. Okay, so that's a big debate, about the minimum wage. But anyhow, so when these two justices switch their vote, it's called this is a newspaper headline. Switch in time saves 9. These two justices switched their vote on the minimum wage, and Roosevelt does not pack the court. Can you explain that to me on the test? Okay. Now, this is a play on words. There's an old wise thing that says a stitch in time saves 9. You guys taking sewing class? Sewing? Can't fit that into your schedule. Okay. So if a stitch comes loose, it's clothing or blanket or something, it unravels. But a stitch in time, say it. I don't make these up. Right, Lily? Okay. Now, from the left, Roosevelt is going to get hit hard by these men. Okay. Now, some of these you might have heard before. Any guy that's ever heard of Huey Long? Huey Long? Another H to add to your list. Okay. Oh, Huey Longs? Austin? Maybe? He was a governor of Louisiana. There's a Kingfish. Okay. What about Father Coughlin? The radio priest. Okay. Later on, I'll mention Fulton Sheen. You guys heard of Fulton Sheen? That's like 1950s. Who's the priest that has the YouTube channel that? Yeah. So this is the father of that time, like that. Millions of people listen to his radio program. Okay, and as a Catholic, guys, as a priest, social justice here. We've got so many people struggling. We have people that are hungry, people that are homeless. Okay, and so Father Coughlin is going to criticize Roosevelt for not going far enough. Now, speaking of Catholics, it is during the Roosevelt administration that Catholics are going to flock in droves to the Democratic Party. So if you have great-grandparents that are still alive, chances are at some point, if they're still not, they were Democrats. Now today, guys, if you study this, and you look at Catholics, it's about 50-50. We'll tell you this, though. Practicing Catholics that go to Mass every week tend to be more Republican than Democrat. Fall-away Catholics tend to be more Democrat. But you guys knew that, didn't you? Did you guys know that? Okay. Now, some of your most pious Catholics can be very liberal. Okay. My good friend Tom O'Connor, his sister is a sister. Or nun, she's a sister. One of the most liberal people you'll ever meet. Dr. Francis Townsend. So I'm going to come back to Huey Long here. Dr. Francis Townsend, self-declared advocate of the elderly. He's got an interesting idea here. Okay? See if you like this. Guys, the elderly are vulnerable, right? So this is what we're going to do. You can give every person over, say, 65, $200 a month. This is going to cover your housing, food, It's going to cover your medicine, clothing. In fact, you're probably going to have some left over at the end of the month. The catch is you have to spend it. So this is your Keynesian economics. Like, we're going to give old people money. You got to spend these $200 every month. And if you don't spend it, you can give it away. Help a charity out. Help another individual out. You can give that money away. You just got to spend it. This is supposed to create economic stimulus, okay? Give the economy a kickstart, and you're taking care of the old people. Yeah.
So what would 200 now? Based on all.
I can Google that, can I? Siri can answer that for me. How much would $200 be in 1935? $4,395. That's a lot. That's a lot.
That's like this 200 a month now wouldn't barely even make rent.
Oh, right, right, yeah, no, over $4,000. You could do a lot with that. Think that much? Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, that'd be like, how much a year? 43 times 12? 4,300 times 12? Somebody quickly?
48.
Okay, yeah, I make a little bit more than that. Say again? Why didn't I put my hourly? Oh, what, 14 I stopped at? Oh, I don't get paid hourly. I'm salary. So it doesn't matter how much I work, I get paid the same.
What's your salary?
Because I'm a professional.
That's crazy.
Above or below?
Above or below?
Yeah.
59?
Offline.
Pre-tax or post-tax? I'm just above that. Now, I am one of the teachers here that have been here the longest. So most people probably don't make that much. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying. It's not bad. Listen, I didn't go into this to get rich. If I needed to, I would do like many have and go and taught in the public schools. But I haven't because I haven't had to, thank God. And I thank God for that because I'm here with you. Okay. So actually, this is maybe not a horrible idea. I don't know. Roosevelt's going to come up with something like this, right? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we didn't get to that third hour, so we'll see what happens. Okay. Now, remember the NRA? It basically codified unions being able to form. Okay. By the way, did you guys hear about the longshoremen? The contract with the longshoremen on the East Coast.
Oh, yes.
It ends tonight. So, yeah, we could have some major problems. If you can't unload the ships. So things like, I had shrimp for lunch. Okay? So if you're importing seafood, that's refrigerator. It's frozen. Okay? So it comes in on a ship. And it's supposed to go onto a rail car that's refrigerated. And then it's put on refrigerated trucks and shipped out all over the country. That ain't happening. Your Christmas gifts that you start ordering now on Amazon, supply chain issues, big time, guys. This is big. President Biden is not getting involved, he said. In fact, they're not even talking. So this strike is likely to start tomorrow. The big problem with the longshoremen is they've offered them a big raise. I mean, like a nice raise. Okay. They're worried about automation. They're worried about losing their jobs to technology. And they want guarantees that they'll have these jobs. And the businesses are like, we don't really want to guarantee you that. So, see what happens. Which could also affect something called prices. That's okay. So the labor unions didn't really like the NRA very much. They call it the national runaround. Okay. Now, we talked about this, strike out. Okay, so now we get to talk about Huey Long. Okay. In 1936, Huey Long is the governor of Louisiana. Raise your hand if you've been to Louisiana. Keep your hand up if you've been to New Orleans. Okay. Did you like it? Did you have fun in New Orleans? Kind of like going to another country in our country. Now, I lived in Baton Rouge for 6 months. My wife lived in Baton Rouge for 12 years. I've been to New Orleans a few times. Okay. New Year's Eve was about the craziest I ever did. I would not recommend going to New Orleans during Mardi Gras. Okay. You can if you want. If you like crazy, have at it. Because it's crazy. Okay. New Year's Eve was something else. Oh, yeah. It's nuts. Were you there during Mardi Gras?
No.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
I still saw some crazy.
Oh, yeah.
people.
In the summer, it smells pretty bad. Because there's a party all day. And then over the night, they try and clean the streets up. You got people that are still on the streets from the night before, you know. But it's fun. It's, you should experience. Now, the food is incredible. Okay. And the culture is neat. Okay. You have the Cajun influence. You got the French influence. Now, when you get down into the Delta, you get these people that we refer to them as coon asses. Okay, these are your Cajun coon asses. Okay, like when I lived in Baton Rouge, I was a graphic artist, and I worked for this print company, and this lady that sat next to me, she spoke English, but I could not understand what she was saying. So I'm gonna show you a video of Huey Long. You can get a taste of it, and then I got another video I'm gonna show you. You get a better taste of it. Okay, but Huey Long was the governor of Louisiana, and in 1936. He wanted to challenge Roosevelt for the Democratic nomination. He said that Roosevelt was not going far enough. And he had a better plan. It's called Share the Wealth Program, where every man would be a king. Every man in America would own a house. Every man in America would have all the things that go into that house. Every man in America would have a radio and an automobile. You are only allowed to, under this plan, only allowed to have so much wealth. Now, I looked it up third out. Bill Gates is worth $137 billion. So under the Share the Wealth program, Bill Gates would only be allowed to own. Now, that's his net worth. That includes his stock in Microsoft, which he has a crap ton of. He would only be able to own about 5% of that stock. Under the Share the Wealth. The rest would be shared with us. Okay? And every man would be a king. Now, this is socialism. But it is like really butting up against that thing. That thing called what? Communism. Roosevelt called Huey Long in 1936, the most dangerous man in America. Okay, but he was growing in popularity. This message that I'm about to show you resonated with people. Okay, and you may like the sound of it too. Okay, and especially if you're poor, you're gonna like the sound of this. You're gonna like it a lot. Okay, if you believe in social justice, I like this. Okay, now, you can still go to the state capitol in Baton Rouge and see the bullet holes from the bullets that missed Huey Long. There were other bullets that connected. He was assassinated on the steps of the state capitol in 1936 before he got that chance to challenge Roosevelt. Okay, he was taken out. Now, he's not a nice man. He had his own police force, not the state troopers of Louisiana. He had his own police force, his own guard, and they wore brown shirts. Anybody make the connection there? Brown shirts? Who else wore brown shirts? The Nazis wore brown shirts. Okay? All right, so I give you Huey Long. You ready? I called him the Kingfish. Got it here somewhere. There it is. Now, I'm gonna have to stop the recording because YouTube won't let me. So, Caden, you're good. Caught up.